Alright guys, welcome back to VALORANT News. Major developments in the VCT last night, with people starting to realise that in the recent patch updates, Chamber actually received a rather major buff to his play that is probably going to make him far more relevant in competitive play. All of a sudden, many of the pro players are getting back on the Chamber bandwagon. We know that Alpha has used him to good effect in recent months, and Yay hits the timeline as well to give his opinion on the matter. The final stretch of the season going towards the playoffs as well as causing lots of drama. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. First of all, just starting here, of course, Tens out having a good time, as we well know, signing right here, Tens whiskey glass, or whiskey bottle it seems, but also this response here. So Durka talked about any devs who actually know how to play the game. Why can't we fix the issue? You know, the remake system isn't working properly and all these other things. And well, Derek Lee here from Riot says, hey Durka, thanks for calling this out. We get it that it sucks and we want to improve the experience for our players. We've already started tuning some back-end systems to better detect repeat offenders, and in patch 11.05 we'll be rolling out additional changes that increase penalty for these folks. So I guess that is at least a good thing, and as he says, look, at least thanks for putting in the work to try and make this happen. But yeah, as we know, things aren't ideal. Things aren't been better though. I mean, they've moved things over to Unreal Engine 5. I think they're what, 58 gigabytes down to 24 or something like that in terms of the size of the game, which is a pretty crazy result, and also some pretty crazy results in the Challenger side last night. So this is how it's been going in Challenger slightly. These are all the matches that we've seen, and as we know, you get to 4 wins, you get through and all that stuff. NV 3-0, Cubit 3-0, no real massive surprises there, but some big results last night. I mean, TSM took down SAD, SRG went down to Legacy. We can just go through a couple of these games here, right, to see how things were transpiring. Of course, yeah, SRG eventually, they go down 2-0 to Legacy Kingdom, 4-13, and then 8-13 the game after that. Burger Boys take down Prosperity, so they're looking pretty good. That was a 2-1 in the end against that team. Blue Water took down SR Black, so, you know, one of the more promising teams potentially. We know that there was some drama with that team earlier on in the season, but they get pretty much clapped 13-5 and then 13-10 on the second Haven, and then it was TSM versus SAD Esports, and TSM continued their solid run this season with a 13-3, 13-11 back on SAD Esports pick on the bind. So that's how things looked going on there last night, and that leaves us standings at least looking kind of like this. So NV, Qbert, you know, they're looking all rather pretty, sitting up here at 3-0, and over the coming days we're going to start to see the Swiss stage conclude, and then that go into the playoffs, and then see who gets to Ascension, who qualifies, and therefore what happens next. Envy play Qubit in a couple of days to determine the first team to get to 4-0 on that side of things. We also had Ixolas Laser. Thought it was just interesting because they were scrimming Furia. They were up 14-6. As we know, these are one of the other key contenders for the rest of the season in the Ascension Tier 2 side. There has been lots of talk about what's going to happen at Ascension. What if Envy do win? Because of course they've got a couple of players who are not yet 18 and therefore could not compete in the VCT. Therefore they would make some changes. There were some rumours that Envy would get Demon 1 if that was to happen. So we can only see how time progresses, but also it's far from guaranteed that they would win Ascension given what we know. But it's also it would be great timing, I think, because if Envy were to win Ascension, they would be back in the league in 2026, and whatever happens during the course of that season, we know that for 2027, they are renewing the franchise agreements. That's when Riot are deciding who's going to stay, who's going to go from their partnership perspective. And look, I don't think they are going to make those decisions purely on performance. That's not how they've done it. So just because Furia are struggling right now doesn't mean they're going to get kicked out of the league. There will be other factors in play, but it will be one of the factors as to why they would potentially change a partnership agreement if there has been consistent underperformance from a particular franchise. But I think it could be good timing if Envy were to win Ascension and they were to make it through and actually qualify for the Pro League, then it would be the perfect time to have a year to prove themselves that they are a valid team to stay around in the league. Because of course, as Optic, as it was before, because Envy and Optic merged and all this stuff, and the name changed, and then Optic didn't get into partnership, right, because they messed up their application or whatever the story was. But in 12 hours' time, they play Qbit Academy, and that's going to be a pretty big game. But let's talk about the chamber stuff. So this is pretty remarkable, really. The 11.02 patch came out, and the patch notes came out as well, and somehow they missed off a very important piece of information, and that piece of information is with regard to chamber. So chamber, the rest of it is, we see him used on occasion nowadays, right? The teleport is still reasonably strong at times, not as strong as it used to be, as we know. The tour de force is still a great ultimate, but he doesn't really have so much utility as a sentinel a lot of the time. His trip, or his, trademark, is not easily placed in a position where it can always get you information from anywhere. So the limit of the trip, I think, is about 10 meters or so, but as we know, over time they made changes to chamber to nerf a few pieces of his kit, especially when if he moves out of range of where his trademark is sitting down, then it no longer works, right? But that is now gone. So he can be wherever he wants on the map, and that trip is still going to be effective on the other side, which is very, very relevant indeed to the state of play here for chamber. So it's a big update. It's one that I'm pretty surprised that they didn't reveal in the patch notes, to be fair, but this will make chamber all of a sudden more viable, because now you can put the trip down, go and do what you want on the other side of the map, and still be very safe in knowledge that your team is going to have that information if required on the other side. So it's a big buff, I think, for Chamber in some respect. It allows him to be far more flexible with the way that he plays, and with the amount of lethal kit that he's got, that becomes particularly valuable. So Derek, who we know has actually been even using some of the Chamber lately, says, damn it, yay, are you seeing this? Maybe EG are going to be back. And then as Ye says, we are so back. So we know the days when Ye was on Chamber, and that was the solid meta, and Ye was just unstoppable on this particular agent. And I think this change does have a sizable impact on how the players will feel about Chamber. It's not like Chamber wasn't used at all either. We did occasionally get some serious Chamber picks in play, but we've not seen him much. Maybe, his pick rate is pretty low compared to some of the more meta agents, but I think this will probably increase that pick rate by a decent amount. And players like Ye, even maybe Derek, who knows, maybe he'll pull it out, but some other agents or some other players as well who like to use Chamber, they may well be back in some serious force here for this kind of push towards the end of the season. So again, we know that Riot are making changes. They do like to make changes to the map pool as well, even going into Champions. Abyss is coming back in, as we know. But even with that in mind, it's got to be said that Chamber could be back in the meta as well in a great capacity. So it's going to be very fascinating indeed. The buff is to help him position more flexibly and help solidify his role. So that's the discussion, and it's possibly a pretty big deal for teams like Evil Geniuses. Now, just before we get to the end of the video, wanted to discuss quickly on the state of that, really, like the state of the way things are in the Americas. Stage 2's underway. Evil Geniuses are sitting, as we know, at 1-1, so maybe the Chamber buff is going to help turn things around for them. They play G2 in a couple of days' time. That's going to be a particularly crucial game. But as we know, these group stages are not exactly setting the world alight. People are at this point just kind of waiting to get towards the playoffs, see what's going to happen there, see who's going to qualify for the World Championship and who is not. And there was some talk about this, right? There was a tweet that was doing the rounds about, the VCT not really feeling like it used to at this time of the year. Trick says that with FNS retiring, with Tens retiring, with Aspas kind of struggling, Sassy retiring, Less is gone, Sadak is gone. The Americas is not as exciting as it used to be. But I do think a large part of it is purely just down to the format and the way that things presently stand. Only a few matches every few days. A lot of these games don't really mean that much because they're not eliminating anyone from any sort of contention, and this is what FNS has to say about the situation pretty much to close out the video. So very much interested to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.
I am holy, trust me. Your boy is dedicated to the cause. I'm not missing another Paper X game, dog. See, this is why this is the other thing about group stages. It just doesn't have the same aura because we love when teams get knocked out and the matches actually mean something. In group stage, it doesn't feel like anything matters up until week 4, week 5, because that's when teams start knowing if they're out or not. So you get the best you could possibly get, quality wise. The first couple of weeks are just it's not that sick. But I feel like week 4, week 5, and then playoffs is always good. Yeah, if it's an elimination game, the stakes are so high, then it's actually fun for me to be just ask chat yo, does this team lose? If they lose, they're out. Then I know in my head the exact mentality that team is going in with, and then it's just juicy no matter what. So yeah, Group stage only hit when you're a fan of the team. Yeah, exactly. That's the other thing. Like, I love watching high quality Valorant when like both teams are really, really good. Like we all do. But when you're dealing with these first couple games, like these group stage games, I don't even want to watch like when Arsenal plays like against Southampton. I'm an Arsenal fan, and even I don't want to watch that game.